Guys, I am so stoked to show you this one. If you looked at my YouTube story the other day, you had seen that I found a massive score on Facebook Marketplace, and it is very rare for us to get this lucky. And so let me just start by kind of saying what took place there. We'll get into the board for sure. You know what, if you're just here just to take a quick look at this board because it's magnificent, but if you're just here for a quick look, I'm going to just do this quickly. There you go. There's the bottom. There's the top. Here's the side profile. Hope you enjoyed it. Enjoy the rest of your day. If you're here for a little bit of a longer video and you want to get into some history and stuff, then stick around because there's a lot of coolness around this. I had a conversation with John as well, so I'm going to talk about that. But yeah, stick around, set it on, and pour yourself a coffee, sit down, and enjoy a little conversation with me here. So anyways, back to how I found this board. So if you're on Facebook Marketplace, if you're a guy like myself, you're checking, these different buy, sell, trade sites all of the time. And so I was on Facebook and I had noticed that a gentleman put up something about, an amazing deal that he had found on Facebook Marketplace. And it was a complete, I forget what board it was exactly. But I'm just like, I was actually going to put a post on there that said, oh yeah, fabulous. Now everybody's going to be crashing Facebook Marketplace looking for the amazing deal. And so honestly, I'm on there on a regular basis, but whenever anybody puts posts like that, you just know everybody's slamming the boards because they want to find one of those amazing deals. And so I'm like, screw it, I need to think outside the box now. I did the same thing. As soon as I seen it, I'm like, yeah, I need to find one of those deals again. And so I decided to go on and just do some random searching. And we've talked a bit about this before. If you're just going on and you're doing Pal Peralta skateboard, you're gonna see Pal Peralta decks and a bunch of other decks that pop up that are using those keywords just to get some eyes on the decks. But you need to start to think outside the box a bit. So I'll put things like skateboard, 2 words, versus skateboard. And then I'll also do things like just searching based on the skateboard riders. And so for example, like that Iron Gate there I got because it said Guerrero. So somebody just posted on there that they had a Guerrero skateboard for sale or a Guerrero deck for sale or something. And it was just buried really deep. Nobody was looking at it because it didn't say Pal Peralta Bones Brigade series. I forget which one that is. Anyways, I forget what series that one is. But yeah, it didn't have any of that information. And so I managed to get that deck at an amazing price point, and was stoked to get it because nobody else was digging deep or thinking outside the box. So with this one, when this one came up, it actually just said John Lucero or Lucero deck or something along those lines. And so when I first seen it, I'm like, I know I've seen other black label decks come out, and I wanted to verify first that it wasn't a reissue. And so with the reissues, you can see that it says black label skateboards here, something along those lines. And then the black label branding, I think down here as well. But you'll also see that it has a cigarette on the graphic. And so there was a few things that were kind of making me go, that might be OG. And then even looking at the truck holes, these look like the old school hole pattern. They didn't look as small as the new school hole pattern. And so I'm like, you know what? It's definitely worth the trip for the price point that he was asking for this deck. The other thing is, I didn't know if it had been gripped or not. It looked like it had been skated potentially, but it still looked like it was in really great shape in spite of it. And even if it was a reissue at the price point, I'm like, screw it, I'm just gonna go down, talk to this guy and get the deck. And so it's varies about an hour and a half for me. So I was willing to do that, 3 to 4 hour round trip just to get my hands on this because I thought it looked pretty cool. So anyways, I show up, I walk over to the guy, I'm about to ask him about, if there's any residue and stuff on the deck to see if it's still sticky from the grip that was pulled off. And he proceeds to tell me that he's had the deck for years, at least 10 years, and he got it from another guy that had had the deck for quite a while. So this deck is over 30 years old. And so, again, guys, I'm going to digress a lot here. But he had started telling a story about there was some sort of skate competition, and I honestly started to black out a bit because I was just checking out the board. I was looking at the truck hole patterns. And so I just started to black out a bit. But if you know about John Lucero's transition, so he was skating with Schmidt sticks, and then he went out on his own, started Lucero Limited in 1988 till about mid-1990. At that point, he had rebranded from Lucero Limited to Black Label. He said something about he just didn't want his name to be forefront, so he wanted to rebrand and rebranded to Black Label. So Black Label, he said, though, he got that from hanging out with his buddies in Canada, and there was a Black Label brand beer up here that they were drinking. And so I'm thinking, I'm just going to make this up now, but let's just say there was a competition. This is not fact, so don't take it that way. But John Lucero, while he was here, this is Lucero Limited deck, was up in Canada doing some sort of competition or demonstration, had a bunch of decks, just gave this one to, this gentleman. And while he was up here, he was drinking a bunch of Black Label beer. Sounds like an amazing story to me anyways. Let's go with it. But this is a Lucero Limited deck. And so I was just excited to see this thing because this thing has never been skated. There's the tail. The graphics obviously have some scrapes and stuff on them. There's never been grip, never been skated. There is, again, we've talked about this in some of my other videos, but with some of the older wood, they can get some like thin vinyl cracking just from the age and being around that long. And so there is a little bit of that on this deck, but it's nice and straight, beautiful concave to it. The stain is still pretty good on it. You could probably make it pop a little bit more if you put some Howard's wood on it or something like that, or that Howard's wax, I mean. You could probably make that pop a little bit more. I did clean it up. There are some other marks on it, like great big white mark and stuff. But this deck has essentially just been sitting around in homes, and that's why it has this marks, because it's been thrown on the floor, probably hung on a wall. There was some like little dots of white paint or something along those lines on it as well that just flaked off. It was easy to get off. But yeah, such an amazing score. And so I'm so stoked on this deck. And so I did that quick little story. I also posted on IG. And so I'm just going to jump into what happened when I posted on IG. So I get this little message from Black Label, and it says, "Rad. That's the original Thumbhead oval. Thumbhead had previously appeared on the nose of the racing stripe board in 88, 89, but this is the first time he gets all the glory. Ha ha ha. I love Thumbhead, and he is still on label boards today. John." So this is John Lucero that I'm having a conversation with. He also puts, also not the first, but one of the earlier double drilled wheelbases. The board was a bit longer than the average board on the market at the time. It was my personal shape at that time. Great board. And so then I had a little bit more conversation with John. We went back and forth because I'm like, okay, if you've tried to look up some of these older boards, they're next to impossible to find information on. So I wanted to take a bit of advantage of it without bugging them too much, but I did want to take a bit of advantage of it. And so I actually I asked him another question here just with regards to the time frame and who was distributing it for him at that time, because I know with the emergency cross, if you go back and watch one of my other videos, recently I borrowed my buddy's Lucero Limited emergency cross deck from 1988. And so if you guys remember, that board, there's like no concave, it's super flat. So even going from 88 to 89, 90, like dramatic difference in the concave. So with my buddy's board, it was Lucero, with John was using NHS Santa Cruz at the time, so you can see manufactured by Santa Cruz down there. There was a stamp on it, and I couldn't find a stamp on this one. And so I was also asking him about that, and then also just asking him about why there wasn't a cigarette in this one here. And so a couple of things that he got back. He said, yes, actually came out at the end of 89, but thought 1990 looked futuristic. At this point, I was working with Vision Distribution, manufactured at the Vision Wood Shop in Costa Mesa, California. All the big companies were starting to struggle. He needed to start fresh, and so he left Vision and started Black Label. And then I asked him about the smoking, and he said, Thumbhead hadn't started smoking just yet. So if you see the reissues, you'll see that he has a cig in his mouth there, even also on the Racing Stripe one, which is actually the original Thumbhead, but it's the Racing Stripe deck. You'll see the little Thumbhead actually has a cig on it on the reissues, but you don't see that on the originals. And guys, so I'm going to be pulling up some pictures here, and as I'm talking, I'll be posting some of that stuff so you can see. So again, on the original Racing Stripe here, so the very first time we see Thumbhead, there was no cig in his mouth, but you can see on the reissues that there is. And then on the Thumbhead 2 board, which this is, and I'll pull up a little graphic to show you why. I just want to pull it up so I have, and this is like one of the best places that I got some specs on it, was with this graphic. Give me a second, guys, as I'm pulling through it here. Sorry, talk amongst yourselves. It's one with John Lucero on it, yeah, and so here it is here. So this says the new Thumbhead 2, gives me some specs on it here. 32 long, 10-quarter wide, double wheelbase, because one is not enough. So yeah, no cig on this one, but the reissue, which I will again push over to here and show you guys. I've got some pics of those as well, and you'll be familiar with it because it's recently dropped, but there's one right there showing the cig on it. And so again, just kind of funny that John had mentioned that this was before he started smoking. All right, what else do we want to talk about this one? Yeah, we talked about John in '88 going from Schmidt sticks into starting Lucero Limited. At that time, he was using NHS. There's, honestly, guys, there's so much that was taking place between 88 to 90 as far as relationships with Rocco, that going sideways, Lucero Limited pivoting into Black Label, some of the different distribution companies that he was using and stuff. But anyways, this is, the Lucero Limited, and it was Vision that was manufacturing and distributing it at the time. So if you look on the top label here though too, it will says here, copyright 1990 Lucero Limited for this graphic, and this one says 1989 Lucero Limited. Now, the other thing that I was going to talk about, even just this graphic itself, there's a little bit of a cool story behind it, and I'm sorry, I have to look down and read this stuff because I'm just not going to remember it all. So here's the story behind this one, and it's kind of a cool story. So I was at a friend's, this is John speaking, I was at my friend's, John Grigley, and he had a postcard from the movie Children of the Dam, and there's all these little kids with no eyes in it, and the 4 kids in this and there's 4 kids in this postcard, and this guy was in the back kind of, so he was at the top of the postcard and his head was cut off. And so we just thought it was funny, so we Xeroxed it a bunch of times, kind of gave it that blown out look and just kind of darkened out the eyes and stuff. And then we just started drawing a bunch of different heads on him. So Grigley drew a big square head. I drew this one that we now know is the Thumbhead. And so actually he was on another board before he got his own board. He is on the nose of the board with the racing stripes he put out. And again, I have pictures here just showing you guys that one. I'll pull that up. Yeah, where is the OG? Yeah, and so this one here, you can see him at the top, no cig. And then this one here again, the reissue, the Black Label reissue with the cig. But yeah, so cool information. So I don't want to stall it too much longer here, guys. I want to make sure that you've got a good look at this OG goodness. There is a little, like there's a few little marks. I don't know if that's from the factory or not, but there was a little mark right here. There is a little mark down here on the tail, just a little dent. But again, this thing's been sitting in a home, just kind of moved around, hanging on walls, probably laying on the floor, people working around it, and just an amazing, beautiful piece of history. And this really is. So again, there's different type of collectors. Like when I started collecting, when a lot of you guys started collecting, you just wanted the boards that your buddy were skating back in the day, right? And then all of a sudden, you start to narrow that down because your collection starts to get ridiculous. And so I kind of moved to professional Bones Brigade riders in the 80s is what you see here. So we have obviously the Big Six, the Bones Brigade, the Big Six. And then you're seeing guys like Nicky Guerrero, Ray Barbie, Frankie Hill, Steve Stedham. You're seeing these other guys that were part of the Bones Brigade as well, that were professionals. You know, they don't get the accolades of being the Big Six, but they were part of the Bones Brigade as well. Kevin Harris, you know, these different guys, right? And so anyways, it changes up. But if you're the collector that is looking for the extremely rare, like that Iron Cross that I had with Justin Ashby, something along those lines, that OG one, if you haven't seen that, go back and check out that video. Awesome story behind that, and yeah, just a wicked, wicked deck. If you're that guy looking for the rarities in skate culture from, you know, the 80s into the early, like essentially 90, maybe 91, then this is the deck. This is what you are looking for, because it is such a small time frame in a magical period of skate culture, 1988 to halfway through 1990. When, yeah, we were seeing that transition from the boards that we were used to kind of, you know, in the early 80s to mid 80s, starting to get into this concave. And John Lucero was so iconic, not just from a skate standpoint, like he was very influential that way, but just his graphics that he was doing. So even when he was with Madrid, when he was with Schmidt Sticks, he'll tell you that he wasn't the best skater and wasn't the one winning the different comps and stuff, but he was selling boards like crazy because people loved his art. And so anyways, this is such an iconic piece of history. If you're that type of collector, then this is the kind of board you are looking for. And it is not mint. There's a few marks on it here, but again, for the time frame, to come across mint boards and something that is so limited is next to impossible. There's probably a handful of these, you know, left out there that would be in good quality condition like this. And I'm just stoked that I was able to get my hands on it. And yeah, such an amazing piece of history. So let's just give it a good look here. Again, just take a look at that concave. Take a good look at that top logo. I'll run it this way. And then let's just finally finish off with some of the specs. And guys, I pulled some of the specs from that one ad, so I know the length and width are accurate. Pursuant to that, as far as wheelbase, tail, and nose, I don't know exactly. I took my measurements and their guesstimations. They're not going to be exact because different people have different ways of measuring decks, but they're going to be really close. They'll give you a good idea. And so getting back to the length, and remember John was saying that this one was a little bit longer for the time, and that's why it has the double drill here. So 32 inches in length. The width on this guy is 10¼ inches. The wheelbase, again, not perfect, but based on my guesstimation here, is 15 inches or 15½ inches, depending on your truck position. The nose, again, we have the two options based on the truck position. We have 5 or 5½ inches, and the tail down here is 6½ inches. The truck hole pattern, and I took my trusty Psycho Riser with me just to use it as a bedding tool, but honestly, as soon as I seen it, I knew it was OG. But we can see here that it is the old school hole pattern, and so you can see that there. And so, as a reminder again, this one being 89, 90-ish, and confirmed by John. This one was manufactured and distributed by Vision at the time. Anyways, guys, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks so much for sticking around. I mean, it's a long conversation here. Hopefully you guys found it interesting, that you were intrigued by just some of the information. But again, such a unique, really rad deck that I'm just so stoked that I had the opportunity to get my hands on. All right, peace out. Please leave some comments. Always love that. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider it. Thanks again for following. Have an amazing week, guys. Cheers. Peace out.